The fluorescent lights in Flint Ridge Medical Center's pediatric wing hummed with their usual mechanical persistence, casting that familiar sterile glow across the polished linoleum floors. I'd walked these halls for 3 years as a quality assurance coordinator, and the rhythm of the hospital had become as natural to me as breathing. My name is Giselle Webb, 32 years old, and I'd built my career on ensuring that every protocol, every procedure, every safety measure functioned exactly as designed. Stonegate, Michigan wasn't exactly a medical hub, but Flint Ridge served our community of 40,000 with dedication that bordered on fierce pride. The pediatric unit, where I spent most of my oversight hours, buzzed with the controlled chaos that comes with caring for children. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency between rooms, their badge scanners beeping rhythmically as they accessed medication dispensers and updated electronic health records in our Epic system. It was during my routine compliance audits that I first noticed the discrepancies. Small things, initially. Medication logs that showed perfect timing but felt somehow too perfect. Hand hygiene monitoring data that consistently showed one particular nurse achieving compliance rates that exceeded even our most meticulous staff members. Linda Stonefield had been with pediatrics for 8 years, longer than anyone except the unit manager, and her reputation was spotless. Linda managed our hand hygiene compliance monitoring programs with an attention to detail that impressed even the Infection Control Committee. Her quarterly reports were models of thoroughness, complete with trending data and improvement recommendations that actually worked. When new nurses started on the unit, Linda was inevitably assigned as their mentor. Parents requested her specifically for their children's care. The attending physicians trusted her clinical judgment without question. But numbers don't lie, and after 15 years in healthcare quality management, I developed an instinct for patterns that didn't quite fit. The medication administration records showed Linda consistently documenting allergy verifications, but the timestamps seemed oddly clustered. Her patient satisfaction scores were consistently high, yet I'd noticed subtle tensions during shift changes when she handed off care to other nurses. The Epic system tracked everything: badge swipes, medication pulls, documentation timestamps, even how long staff spent in patient rooms. Linda's patterns were textbook perfect, which in itself raised questions. Perfect compliance usually indicated either exceptional dedication or careful manipulation of data. In my experience, even the best nurses occasionally ran a few minutes late on medication rounds, or forgot to scan their badges entering isolation rooms. 3 weeks ago, I'd started conducting unannounced spot checks during Linda's shifts. Nothing dramatic, just casual observations while reviewing charts at the nurses' station or checking supply inventory in the medication room. Linda's interactions with families appeared warm and professional. Her documentation was thorough and timely, yet something felt orchestrated, like watching a performance rather than witnessing genuine patient care. The pediatric unit's medication room required dual verification for high-risk medications, particularly those with known allergy potential. 2 nurses had to independently verify patient identity, medication orders, and allergy status before administration. Linda consistently volunteered for these verifications, positioning herself as the reliable second check that other nurses could count on. Her willingness to help seemed admirable, even exemplary. Yesterday, while reviewing incident reports from the past quarter, I discovered something that made my stomach tighten. 3 separate near-miss events involving medication allergies, all occurring during Linda's shifts, all prevented by what the reports described as last-minute allergy verification catches. The pattern suggested either remarkable vigilance or something far more troubling. The medication administration records showed Linda's electronic signatures on allergy verification steps that, according to the timestamps, occurred after medications had already been prepared and drawn up. In our system, allergy verification was supposed to happen before medication preparation, not after. The sequence suggested either system errors or deliberate circumvention of safety protocols. I'd spent my career believing that healthcare professionals entered this field to help people, to be part of something meaningful and healing. The possibility that someone might manipulate safety systems for personal gain felt like a betrayal of everything our profession represented. But the data was becoming impossible to ignore. and my responsibility to patient safety outweighed any personal discomfort with investigating a respected colleague. As I sat in my office reviewing Linda's compliance records for the fourth time this week, the familiar sounds of the pediatric unit continued beyond my door. Families laughing with their children, nurses coordinating care plans, the gentle chaos of healing happening all around me. But underneath that comforting routine, something was very wrong, and I was the only one who seemed to notice. The weight of what I might discover pressed against my chest like a physical force, and I realized that my comfortable world of quality metrics and compliance reports was about to become something much more complicated and dangerous. The investigation into Linda Stone's medication practices began 3 weeks after my initial discovery. I approached it methodically, the way I'd been trained to handle quality assurance reviews, with careful documentation and systematic analysis. What I found challenged everything I thought I knew about professional integrity. Linda had been at Flint Ridge Medical Center for 8 years, arriving fresh from nursing school with stellar recommendations and an infectious enthusiasm for pediatric care. Her personnel file read like a model employee's resume. Consistent performance evaluations, voluntary overtime during staffing shortages, and glowing feedback from families whose children she'd cared for. She'd been promoted to senior pediatric nurse within 5 years, a trajectory that spoke to both competence and dedication. Our professional relationship had developed naturally over my 2 years in quality management. Linda frequently volunteered for compliance initiatives, offering to pilot new safety protocols or participate in training programs. When I implemented the hand hygiene compliance monitoring program last year, she was among the first to embrace the electronic tracking system, even helping train other staff members on proper badge scanning procedures. "Giselle, you make this stuff actually make sense," she'd said during one of our training sessions, her smile warm and genuine. "Most people in your position just throw policies at us and expect magic. You actually care about making it work." That comment had meant more to me than she probably realized. Quality management often felt like a thankless position, caught between administrative demands and clinical realities. Having a respected nurse like Linda validate my approach felt like confirmation that I was making a real difference in patient care. The hand hygiene monitoring program became one of our department's success stories. Compliance rates improved from 68% to 92% within 6 months, and Linda's unit consistently ranked among the highest performers. She'd even suggested modifications to the tracking system that improved accuracy and reduced false readings. Her engagement seemed to exemplify the kind of collaborative relationship between quality management and clinical staff that every hospital administrator dreamed of achieving. But as I dug deeper into the medication allergy incidents, inconsistencies began emerging that couldn't be explained by system glitches or documentation errors. The Epic electronic health record system maintained detailed audit trails for every action, and those trails told a troubling story about Linda's medication administration practices. The first incident involved a 7-year-old patient with a documented penicillin allergy. According to the medication administration record, Linda had verified the allergy status at 2:47 p.m., but the pharmacy log showed she'd already retrieved the amoxicillin from the automated dispensing system at 2:31 p.m. The medication had been prepared and was ready for administration before the allergy verification was completed. Only a last-minute double-check by another nurse had prevented a potentially serious allergic reaction. The second incident followed a similar pattern. A 5-year-old with a documented sulfa allergy, medication retrieved and prepared before allergy verification, crisis averted by what the incident report described as Linda's exceptional attention to detail in catching the potential problem. But the timestamp suggested she'd created the problem in the first place by bypassing standard verification procedures. The third incident was the most concerning. A 3-year-old patient with multiple drug allergies, including a severe reaction to ibuprofen, documented prominently in the medical record. Linda had retrieved children's ibuprofen from the dispensing system, prepared the dose, and was approaching the patient's room when she suddenly stopped, returned to the medication station, and initiated an allergy verification check. The incident report praised her vigilance, but the audit trail suggested she'd deliberately ignored the allergy warnings during initial medication preparation, Each incident had been reported as a near miss prevented by excellent nursing judgment. Linda had received commendations for her attention to patient safety, and the incidents had been used as examples of how proper protocols could prevent medication errors. But the electronic suggested a different narrative entirely, one where safety protocols were being deliberately circumvented and then dramatically discovered to create the appearance of exceptional vigilance. The pattern became more disturbing as I expanded my review. Over the past 18 months, Linda's shifts had generated an unusually high number of near-miss reports involving medication allergies, equipment malfunctions, and documentation discrepancies. In each case, Linda had been the nurse who identified and resolved the problem, often receiving recognition for her quick thinking and dedication to patient safety. But the timing and circumstances of these incidents suggested something far more calculated. The equipment malfunctions always occurred with devices Linda had recently inspected as part of her quality assurance duties. The documentation discrepancies involved records she'd been responsible for reviewing. The medication near misses followed her systematic bypassing of safety protocols, creating dangerous situations that she then heroically resolved. I spent hours in my office cross-referencing incident reports with staffing schedules, medication logs, and equipment maintenance records. The data painted a picture of someone who had learned to manipulate safety systems for personal gain, creating problems that she could then solve to enhance her professional reputation. The recognition and commendations she'd received weren't rewards for exceptional nursing. They were the fruits of elaborate deception. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Linda hadn't been an exemplary nurse who occasionally caught dangerous mistakes. She'd been systematically creating those dangerous situations, putting patients at risk to manufacture opportunities for recognition and career advancement. Every commendation in her file, every safety award she'd received, represented a moment when a child's well-being had been compromised for her personal benefit. The hand hygiene compliance program that had made both our careers look successful suddenly took on a sinister dimension. Linda's enthusiasm for the monitoring system hadn't been about improving patient care. It had been about learning how quality assurance systems worked, understanding their vulnerabilities, and figuring out how to manipulate them. She'd used her position as a pilot program participant to gain insider knowledge about how compliance was measured and reported. As I sat in my office that Thursday evening, the pediatric unit quiet except for the soft sounds of night shift preparations, I realized that everything I'd believed about Linda Stone had been carefully constructed fiction. The colleague I'd trusted, the nurse I'd held up as an example of clinical excellence, had been systematically endangering the children in her care while building a reputation as a safety champion. The weight of that knowledge felt crushing. How many other incidents had there been that I hadn't discovered yet? How many children had been put at risk while Linda manufactured her image as an exceptional nurse? And how had I, someone whose job was specifically to identify and prevent these kinds of problems, been so completely deceived? The trial was overwhelming, but I knew that confronting Linda would require more than data analysis and audit trails. I needed to understand the full scope of her deception before taking action, and I needed to be absolutely certain that my accusations could withstand the scrutiny that would inevitably follow. Because once I reported what I'd discovered, there would be no going back for either of us. The next morning, I arrived at Flint Ridge Medical Center with a folder containing everything I'd discovered about Linda Stone's systematic manipulation of patient safety protocols. The crick was damning, but I knew that presenting it would require careful navigation of hospital politics and administrative procedures. My first stop was Dr. Catherine Blackwood's office. As Chief Medical Officer, she had the authority to initiate formal investigations and the clinical background to understand the implications of what Linda had been doing. Catherine had always been direct in her approach to patient safety issues, which made her the logical choice for this conversation. "Giselle, you look like you haven't slept," Catherine observed as I knocked on her open door. "What's going on?" I closed the door behind me and placed the folder on her desk. "I need to report a serious patient safety concern involving Linda Stone in pediatrics. What I've discovered suggests systematic manipulation of allergy verification procedures and deliberate creation of near-miss incidents." Catherine's expression shifted immediately from casual concern to focused attention. She opened the folder and began reviewing the documentation I'd compiled, the audit trails, the pattern analysis, the correlation between Linda's shifts and allergy protocol violations. "This is extensive work," she said after several minutes of silent review. "How long have you been investigating this?" "I started noticing patterns about 2 weeks ago. The data goes back 6 months, possibly longer." Linda has been deliberately bypassing allergy verification steps, then positioning herself to catch the errors before they reach patients. She's been manufacturing safety incidents to enhance her reputation as an exceptional nurse. Catherine leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. The hand hygiene compliance program. She was involved in that pilot, wasn't she? She was. And I believe she used that access to learn how our quality monitoring systems work, specifically to understand how to manipulate them without triggering automatic alerts. "Have you discussed this with anyone else?" "No one. I wanted to bring it to you first because of the clinical implications and the need for a formal investigation process." Catherine nodded approvingly. That was the right call. This kind of allegation requires careful handling. We'll need to involve risk management and potentially human resources, but we also need to ensure patient safety isn't compromised during the investigation. She picked up her phone and dialed an extension. "Ian Whitmore? I need you in my office immediately for a patient safety consultation. Bring your investigation protocols." Ian Whitmore, our risk management director, arrived within minutes. His reputation for thorough, discreet investigations had made him invaluable during previous incidents involving staff misconduct. Catherine briefed him on the situation while I provided additional details about the I'd compiled. "The pattern is clear," Ian said after reviewing the documentation, "but we need to be careful about how we proceed. If Linda becomes aware of the investigation before we've secured all she could potentially destroy records or alter her behavior in ways that compromise our ability to build a complete case." "What do you recommend?" Catherine asked. "Immediate administrative leave pending investigation. We'll need to secure her access credentials and conduct a comprehensive audit of all cases she's been involved with over the past year. Giselle, I'll need you to work with our IT department to pull complete system logs for Linda's Epic access during the timeframes you've identified." The next few hours moved with the controlled urgency that characterized serious hospital investigations. Linda was called to a meeting with human resources and informed that she was being placed on administrative leave pending a review of patient safety protocols. Her badge access was deactivated, and she was escorted from the building according to standard procedure. I watched from my office window as Linda walked to her car in the parking lot. Even from a distance I could see in her posture, the way she moved, with the careful control of someone trying not to reveal their emotional state. Part of me felt a stab of sympathy for the colleague I'd thought I knew, but that feeling was quickly overwhelmed by anger at the systematic way she'd endangered children while building her reputation. The investigation that followed was exhaustive. Ian Whitmore coordinated with IT to pull complete system logs, worked with pharmacy to review medication preparation protocols, and interviewed staff members who had worked with Linda during the incidents I'd identified. The picture that emerged was even more disturbing than my initial analysis had suggested. Linda hadn't just been manipulating allergy verification procedures. She'd been systematically creating multiple types of near-miss incidents: medication timing errors, dosage calculation mistakes, equipment malfunctions, always positioning herself to discover and correct the problems before they affected patients. Her personnel file showed a pattern of commendations and recognition that directly correlated with these manufactured incidents. "She's been doing this for at least 18 months, Ian reported during a meeting with Catherine and myself 3 days into the investigation, possibly longer. The sophistication of her approach suggests this wasn't impulsive behavior. It was a calculated strategy for career advancement." "What about actual patient harm?" Catherine asked. "That's the most disturbing aspect. She was skilled enough to ensure that her manipulations never resulted in actual adverse events. She understood exactly how far she could push these situations without crossing the line into causing real harm. It suggests a level of clinical knowledge and planning that makes this particularly egregious. The investigation also revealed that Linda had been documenting her catches of safety issues in ways that highlighted her vigilance and clinical expertise. She'd been building a portfolio of incident reports and safety interventions that painted her as an exceptional nurse with an unusual ability to prevent errors. Several of these reports had been used to support her applications for internal promotions and professional development opportunities. As the scope of Linda's deception became clear, I found myself questioning every interaction we'd had, every conversation about patient safety and quality improvement. The colleague who had seemed so passionate about protecting children had been systematically putting them at risk for personal gain. The trust I'd placed in her, the professional relationship I'd valued, had been built on a foundation of calculated manipulation. The most difficult part of the investigation was reviewing the specific cases where Linda's actions had created dangerous situations. While no patients had been harmed, the potential for serious adverse events had been real. Children with severe allergies had received medications that could have triggered life-threatening reactions if Linda hadn't intervened at precisely the right moment. The margin for error in some of these situations had been terrifyingly narrow. The question now, Catherine said during our final investigation meeting, is how we prevent this from happening again. Linda exploited vulnerabilities in our systems that we didn't know existed. Ian nodded. She understood our quality monitoring processes well enough to work around them. That suggests we need to redesign some of our safety protocols to make this kind of manipulation more difficult. I've been thinking about that, I said. The hand hygiene compliance program gave her insight into how we measure and report safety metrics. We need to limit access to that kind of operational data and create more robust verification systems for critical safety procedures. The investigation concluded with Linda's termination and a report to the state nursing board detailing her violations of professional standards. The was forwarded to appropriate regulatory authorities, and new protocols were implemented to prevent similar incidents in the future. Throughout the process, I was struck by how Linda's betrayal had affected not just the patients in her care, but the entire culture of trust that made effective healthcare possible. Her actions had exploited the collaborative environment that hospitals depend on, using the assumption of good faith that colleagues extend to each other as a weapon for personal advancement. The pediatric unit felt different after Linda's departure. Staff members who had worked closely with her struggled to reconcile the colleague they'd known with the person revealed by the investigation. The sense of professional camaraderie that had characterized our department was replaced by a more cautious atmosphere, as people questioned whether they could trust their own judgment about their colleagues. But there was also a sense of relief that the truth had been discovered before any children were seriously harmed. The investigation had revealed the full scope of Linda's deception and ensured that she would never again be in a position to endanger patients for personal gain. Justice had been served, even if the process had been painful for everyone involved.